Play. It is the most divine activity around. When we play, we dive into our hearts. We find our true selves, and we change the course of history. And here at Philosospiel, we let our inner child loose. So, how about we philosophize? This is Philosospiel, video game philosophy. And I'm your host, David Leibowitz. Time to get the spiel for your enlightenment. Game start.
Hello, this is David Lee with Philosospiel Video Game Philosophy. And we are back again, finally, towards the end of Season 4 to do what we, or maybe the end of Season 4. We'll see if the Pokemon thing is going to be a beginning 5 or end of 4. That we did 2 years ago. We did a discussion on Persona 3. Luckily, the Persona 3 remake has come out. But we basically talked about Persona 3, and I know there's additions to it, especially to our favorite people who think that life is meaningless. I know there's going to add more to that, but until I see that myself, I don't want to talk about it yet. So instead,
I want to talk about that.
I know we want to talk about those guys again, but I need to. We'll do that again. We will do that again. I know they get development in the remake, so that'll be fun. But we're going to talk instead about politics. A game that tries to merge Jungian politics. But first, how about you introduce yourself, Professor Cooper?
Professor Cooper, Stephen Cooper, professor of religious studies, Franklin Marshall College, expert in early Christianity and its crossovers with Greek philosophy, dilettante in the world of contemporary commentary on things like politics and then stuff I don't know about, but thanks to David, I'm being introduced to the world of video games and everything cool that goes on. Kind of other intellectual hobbies, psychoanalysis, Freud, Jung.
Which is what we're here for, which is the main reason.
Yeah.
Yes, so since this is now turning into our new version, I'm basically just recording our show and tell that I usually do just at Cooper's office hours. Before we get to the main topic, there is another game being made by the people who made the Persona 3, 4, and 5, which is basically a merging of Persona and Game of Thrones. And there's something very interesting that I think you'll find that I was very happy to hear. But I will play. It's just a minute clip where the game is not out yet. This is just the developer talking about the game.
Okay.
Even though it's a world where magic exists, people can't use it without help. In this world, you have to purchase a special piece of equipment to be capable of magic. Magic is a kind of power that is supposed to spring from a person's imagination, but that art has been lost over time. Now, magic has more restrictions. In other words, people have become reliant on the world's magical tools. That said, the main characters are able to transform their own bodies into weapons, which we call archetypes.
That's what I've been waiting to show you. But I guess let me finish it. It's just like 20 more seconds.
People are born with various heroic aspects.
Yes. There you go. For some reason, this word has not shown up in all of Persona, and they finally used the word archetype here.
Would that they had never used it if they're going to couple it with the word weapons.
Yeah.
This kind of leads into what I sort of want to get to talk about in a while is what's the point of Jungian psychology identification of archetypes? Is it just a realm of fun and games with the collective unconscious? Or are there serious ethical issues, as Jung intimates on practically every piece of writing he ever did on the topic of archetypes? The framing, we'll come back to this. So, like, what is it about the archetypal world that I would argue, and it seems like this producer also wants to say, draws young men into the world of, at least an imaginary world, of weapons.
That's interesting.
So that's up where I want to go later.
But the interesting thing is they're going to take the word archetype very literally. which is apparently why they saved archetype all the way for this instead of and use personas for personas, because here's what the word they use associated with archetype.
Okay.
But these embodiments are typically never awakened, and when they are, it's not as though it was predetermined. An awakening happens by interacting with others and being inspired by their actions. For example, you might think to yourself that someone acts very much like a knight, or another person might seem like a true warrior. By making this connection, the archetype of the warrior, which has been dormant within you since birth, is awakened. That's how the system works.
So they specifically use the word, they're going by the actual big archetypes as opposed to like different religious figures. The warrior, I'm guessing, the magician.
And I think they're correct to do that, but they're acting as if the conscious personality has freedom over these archetypes once they're activated, which is actually a fundamental misunderstanding of Jung, and one that I had as a college student. And let me tell you just a brief story about that.
Of course.
So this is in the late 1970s at Hampshire College. I had been introduced to Jung, Freud, Reich, whole psychoanalytic tradition. And what was probably the most famous Jungian analyst of the time came to the college to give a talk. That was James Hillman.
Oh, I love Hillman.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the story. Maybe a couple years before, I tripped out in LSD very intensely, and it was sort of the end of my tripping career. This is spring of 1977. And it was the end of my tripping career because I contacted a layer of the psyche that like freaked the fuck out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had been reading enough Freud and Jung that I understood that what I was contacting was below the level of the personal contents of one's own like father complex or whatever the Freudian stuff would be. And I kind of fell into this other realm, and I was like, oh shit, all I want to be is my smaller normal self going about my business on campus. Came down from the trip. Important stuff happened in my psyche that I broke through some unconscious material in childhood that was like tying me in knots. And so I associated this trip and the contacting of these deep layers of the unconscious with the kind of personal freedom I'd gotten over personal complexes. But I had not yet gone into therapy. That would have to wait if I'd be in my early 20s and had made a bad marriage and came out of it quickly. And I was like, I must get myself to a psychoanalyst. And I went to a Jungian, and I was in therapy for like 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very helpful in my 20s and early 30s. Anyway, when James Hillman came and gave this lecture, after the lecture, I raised my hand and I said, Professor Hillman, from my own experience, I associate the archetypes with freedom. Is that right? And he looked at me very gravely.
Oh.
And he said, no, I think you've got a mistake. The archetypes are representative of instincts that, unless you develop conscious, personal relationships, critical relationships to this unconscious material, they drag you along in old instinctual patterns, and you don't get to the freedom of it just by following the fascinating power of the archetype.
Right.
And I never forgot that, because honestly, I was a little disappointed in Hillman's answer, because I didn't quite realize how I'd misinterpreted my experience and what the freedom aspect of it was. There was a freedom aspect, but it wasn't something that the archetypes bestowed on me. It was rather a releasing from some personal complexes that were all within the realm of the Freudian unconscious. So when I see someone saying, like, the contact with other people can awaken the warrior in you, and then you become the warrior, that's exactly the worrisome thing that Hillman was talking about, which is because just like instinctual activity, eating, sex, raising a child, which I've experienced, incredibly meaningful. All the instinctual activities, working for a living, instinctual activities are very meaningful. And when you're engaged in them, there's really no question of meaninglessness because you're feeding yourself, you're engaging in a deep relationship, which could lead to propagation of the species. You're putting bread on the table. All that stuff is meaningful. And so for someone who doesn't feel any meaning, it's kind of great to get on that sort of archetypal sort of pattern of doing these human things that feel so deeply meaningful. And I'm not denying that. And for the same reason too, being conscripted into a war is a deep level meaning situation. There's an author called Chris Hedges who wrote a book called War is a Force That Gives Life Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
the problem is not everything that gives life meaning is good, personally freeing, or liberating.
Yes.
You can get plenty of meaning by following a fascist dictator.
Exactly. And could I
So
stop you there?
this is what we're talking about. So it's like, it's not fun and games with the archetypes. It's be very careful about the unconscious powers awoken in the psyche that can make you feel deeply tuned in. And we'll come back to this. So why don't you
Yeah.
show me some more?
Yes. Okay.
we'll-
Now, I guess I will say regarding instincts, I will say now we're on to Persona 5 Tactica. I've shown you showed you original Persona 5, I showed you Persona 5 Royal, I showed you Persona 5 Strikers. I know it's all probably hazy for you because it's been a while, but I will say for this one, it actually does very interestingly finally use the word instinct when we get to not the god figure. I'm just gonna say it. Spoilers for I'm just gonna be spoiling all of this game already. That the god figure is born of an instinct, which is basically implied with the other ones, but here they say straight up, it is an instinct. And I guess I'll save what that instinct is. Hopefully we have time to get to it. If not, I'll say it during when I have to. But it is born of an instinct, and it shows that instinct is not that positive. It is actually not positive in some ways, and it actually stops change. So
that makes sense because instincts inadvertently protect the individual, but they relate to the evolution of the species, and they're designed to really propagate the species.
yeah,
And
it's all about. I'll just say it, but I want to still hear you how it's explained in game. But they say that Salmael is our instinct of self-preservation, and that is seen as the antagonist of this whole game. Is and I and they say that well we'll get there. I would like to have that explained, but first let's quick Paradise Lost quote.
The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven.
Says the devil.
So what do you think about the use of that? That immediately blew my mind that they started with this. They have
okay.
Persona has started with a quote since the first game. Persona 1 started with the dream of the butterfly. And I think early on in Persona 2 Innocent Sin there's Der Doppelganger, but this again starts the whole game with a quote. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think what it's not saying is that anytime you take quotation from a literary work, you have to look in whose mouth that comes.
And it comes from Satan?
This comes from Satan.
Okay.
And in the context of the whole poem, it's just another of Satan's lies.
Oh.
Right? In other words, the mind's own place. It can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. Yeah, it can if you want to delude yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not clear that deluding oneself is the way to, if not even a heaven, something approaching more of an earthly paradise, which is really all I'm looking for.
All right, now to the shadow confrontation. Speaking of delusions. Now I will say, I guess I'll preface this with there's a sense that this actually might not exactly be a organic shadow, that it's actually a creation of Samael. But but we'll go for it and I'll show.
Who is this Samael? How is that spelled?
They put an L. They added an L in between it. They added an L for some reason. They say Salmael, Samael.
Oh, okay. The Aramaic word Samael, god of the blind from the Gnostic texts.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Arena, welcome.
I'll play this and I'll explain what's going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to see you've arrived safely. How many times must I repeat myself? Who the hell are you? Who am I? My, what a surprise. You of all people should already know. I am the embodiment of your sin. I'm you, Toshiro. Me?
What do you... Should I continue? I'll keep on playing.
Okay, no. So this is also an important point about the archetypes.
Yeah.
And it goes directly with something Jung says about when, patients undergoing analysis with him come in contact or become aware of either shadow material, archetype of like sin, I am your sin, or archetypal material. Jung's point is you don't want to identify with those inner figures. Like you are not like the primal father. You are not the magician. You are not the witch. Right? Because if you do that, what Jung says is you get like you get what he calls inflation. In other words, your ego in identifying with these archetypal figures gets filled with psychic energy, and you start moving into something kind of like a megalomaniac position where you think you are the savior or some demonic figure, or you're identified with some of these powers of the unconscious. It's interesting. There's a documentary about Charles Manson, who tries to lay the same rap that shadow figure is. Charles Manson, after he was arrested for murders, he told some interviewing, I don't know whether it was reporters or psychiatrists, he said, "I'm only what's inside each and every one of you." Right? No, actually not. We might have potential, given certain conditions, to defend ourselves, to kill, even to kill in anger and so forth. But that doesn't mean you are it, or somehow Charles Manson embodies what we all really are. Right? This is the interpretation of, I think it's a false interpretation of the unconscious. You are not it. Are these instincts that are evolved over the history of the species. And it's a very precious development when human beings developed enough ego strength to start living cooperatively together and developing laws that regulated how they would provide for their instincts. No, we're not allowed to steal, rob, and kill whenever we feel like it. Yes, there are those impulses, but what civilized humanity means is not feeling like you have to embody each and every impulse. Like that's what psychopaths do. Either it's you have a strengthened ego, and as Freud says, the ego controls the approach to motility or movement or action, and in healthy people it does.
And I'll say, I guess I'll spoil things right now. He does this. This is to me regarding Persona 5. This is the closest thing we're going to get to an actual shadow, but it's still not what they did in Persona 4 or what that thing in Persona 3, the answer, where he's not going to accept the shadow. There's actually he's not going to accept this one. This shadow is more of one is a Samael playing mind games with him, but it's also a force of it's more of his force of repression, of repressing another thing, which is that girl, which is what is the thing that he's going to accept.
Okay, so that's getting a little bit outside of the Jungian or Freudian notions where and I think Jung was understanding the shadow is it's what results from the repression of, in some cases, harmful impulses,
exactly.
or in other cases instinctual impulses that, for example, socially we can't enact, or maybe we're too severe in ourselves, and so the incorporation of the shadow through a relationship with it is, of course, what Jung is going for.
All right, so let's just go.
Being nothing more than a mindless puppet at your fiance's beck and call. Killing your mother by dragging her out on a selfish whim. And then masquerading as a hero of your school, only to send your idol careening into the depths of despair. All of these are sins you decided to deny. Isn't that right? Shut up! No, Toshiro. I pity you. All of your pain and suffering is because of her, Eri Natsuhara. This girl, the lingering husk of your dream.
That's what she's part shadow. That's the actual shadow that needs to be accepted as her. But let me continue.
Okay, what I'm noticing is
what's
that
repressing that.
Well,
I'm aware they're playing fast and loose with still with the word shadow, but
understood. But so what this so-called shadow is tempting.
Yes.
Young man, who I guess is the implied character, Toshiro.
He's a politician, yeah, Toshiro.
The shadow is tempting him to join in with misogyny.
Yes.
Which is to say, like, man, you shouldn't let that woman control you. We need to reinstall patriarchy.
Exactly.
This is the appeal of fascism today in the U.S. And because I pay a great deal of attention to the news, I'm very alarmed when I hear statistics about young people and hear that young women are skewing heavily Democratic, very heavily Democratic, but more young men, including young men of color, Black and Latino men, seem to be thinking Trump has something for them. This is the siren call of fascism. Restore male power by putting a strong, if psychopathic, leader in control. Then, man, you'll be able to have dignity again.
So this character is in line to be next prime minister.
Yeah, right.
But he's realizing. But all this is because he's been set up by his basically fascist father, who's basically. And this is basically the voice in him that's been rationalizing all along, saying, "Yes, this is good that you're doing all this." She, the voice of revolution, should go away. But let me continue.
Sure. Okay. So one footnote, footnote here, for the readers, read Freud's group psychology and the analysis of the ego. There's a website called archive.org, plain old archive.org. It's a library. You can download books that copyrights out on group psychology and analysis of the ego. It goes into this question of why, when people get drawn in by a strong leader, all of their critical faculties fall away. Right? And it's all about the way people get attracted to mass movements. And it's really important for the future of the world that particularly young men have their critical radar happening as regards these so-called strong men that want to restore masculinity.
All right.
You just stay put and behave yourself while I strangle this rebel filth. Take it, Toshiro! What a wasted effort. He won't be fighting back any longer. Now, for the finishing touch. Be grateful, Toshiro. After this, you'll never make the same foolish mistake again. Die, you accursed husk of Eri Natsuhara!
To explain briefly, she's a well, they explain further what exactly she is, which is, I think, brilliant. But basically, she's a cognitive version of his childhood friend in high school who inspired him to be a rebel. And then it got so crazy, they rose up against this asshole vice principal, and then that principal went insane and pushed her into a train, and she got life-altering injuries. So he basically thought, no, all that revolution, even though we did it, we were successful, it was all for naught, and he became a spineless politician for the rest of his life.
All right, so here,
this is the Force trying to finally repress that forever while this is this war happening within him right now.
Right, I just got to inject my own critical comment.
Of course.
The opposite of fascist organizations are not leftist terror Antifa organizations.
Mm-hmm.
That's more group madness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we're in a democratic society, we don't want civil war. We don't want violence.
Mm-hmm.
We want more reasonable policing, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, when you get anarchy, when you get something like that, who are the people that have the most guns and have the military training? It's the fascists. You saw them on January 6th,
mm-hmm.
on 2021. We know what they're about. They want a fight. All right. It would be, I mean, this is where Reich's mass psychology of fascism is really pertinent. When normal middle class people get scared of freaky looking revolutionaries, they would rather have a fascist leader who will suppress those. Right. So America's democracy is in danger, but those who are committed to it need to get on the side of voting, organizing, working within the system, not slandering of all politicians as if they're all alike. I mean, I'm a Bernie Sanders guy. I know you are too, David.
Yeah.
We're Bernie guys because he's a democratic socialist, and I believe, and tell me if you disagree, capitalism needs a strong dose of socialism.
Yes, of course,
to prevent from relapsing back into a version of the Middle Ages or the early modern era. But we have to get that through democratic change.
And I think this is about democracy. I think it's all just a metaphor rather than, it's not an actual putting forward.
No, but I worry with the imagery of knives. I worry with the easy label rebel. Remember in the US, who were the people like to call themselves rebels? Those who fly the Confederate flag, that is a fascist flag. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, it's not like the word rebel.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay. There was some internet problems here.
No, but I get what I get what you're saying. And we talked about this with I had an interview of Toshiro's voice actor, and he had a very poignant point. Like, he played this character, but it's like at the end, it does feel weird that all of these metaphors, even though no one physically gets hurt in this game. I mean, no one dies in this game. No one gets hurt. It's all just cognitive. It's all that. They don't even take away people's free will in this game. No one's heart gets changed. They don't even do that. This is all just inspiring Toshiro to, well, okay, God gets killed, but outside of that, they kill God, but outside of that, yeah, it is revolutionary. And I mean, you'll see the exact archetype, the exact figure they use for what Toshiro's persona becomes. But let me briefly show you this.
Deciding to stand up to Nakabachi,
which was very much peaceful.
That wasn't a mistake. As for me, I may not be fighting by your side for a while. But if you can find a way to keep fighting, to hold on to that will for change instead of regretting it, then I promise
I'll catch back up to you one day, and we'll keep making this world better.
He basically thought that because she got life-changing injuries, that all of that change, which involved no violence, was all for nothing. Like, so.
Yeah. Yep. Right. No, this is the frustrating thing about human social existence, and why there really is either a temptation to despair and drop out and just enjoy one's life, or conversely to go for extremist solutions that involve increases of violence and so forth. It's human social life is very, very difficult, and if you think about it, democracy is a young experiment, and unfortunately, the founding fathers put quite a few anti-democratic provisions into the Constitution, most notoriously the Electoral College and actually the Senate. So this is the problem: is we have a Constitution that contains anti-democratic provisions that the Republicans make extreme use of. If we think about how it was that Roe v. Wade, for example, got overturned by Trump's Supreme Court, and it's tough. So it's frustrating. It's just I'm coming near the end of my working life. I'm about to retire in a few years, and I spent my working life teaching young people like you at college, and of course you were on the extraordinary end of my students. But the whole point is like we have needs. Young people have needs to get established in a profession, but the seduction of just letting the world go to hell while you make your million or enjoy your life,
Which is this is the whole deal. I mean, again, this guy could have had a silver spoon for his whole life,
yeah.
but he realized his father was an asshole, and I mean the world before this was him. So the first two worlds were he had to first stand up to a cognitive version of the woman that he was going to be married off to for her money, and then the second one was standing up to his father, and now he's standing up to himself.
Okay, and that is heroic. I grant, and this is why. For example, one of Freud's early students, Otto Rank, wrote this book, The Myth of the Birth of the Hero. And it's all about the struggle of the individual ego to sort of overcome the forces that attempt to sort of enslave you in either your family's or your society's package of what you ought to be. And that, so as Jung says, the struggle for individuation that one goes through an analysis really is a struggle against internalized social and parental imagos that want you to be like them. Right. And sometimes we have to step outside. We have to fight to get free of those things internally so that we have sort of genuine choices.
Well,
the
moment he chooses to to fight against the system.
That's
right. All right, let's see it.
I'm
very unique.
You seem to have found your resolve. All manner of suffering can lead your heart astray. But a kindled flame can withstand any strife in this world. And with this, we begin the next chapter. I am now, thou art I. Now, call my name!
So,
Yeah.
do you know who Ernesto is?
No.
It's Che Guevara. It's Che Guevara.
Oh, funny. All I know is this whole the I am thou,
I
thou
know
art.
you don't like I am that. I know you get that. That's from Hinduism. I get it. It's from Hinduism.
Yeah, thou art that. But that's talking about the individual Atman is identical with the world Brahman.
Yes.
And the world Brahman is not an individual figure.
No, he's it is. It's not he, it is it. It is
It is the totality.
it is everything. It is everything.
Yeah. I now the I am thou, thou art me, or whatever that is. I oppose that to the philosopher Martin Buber's book called I and Thou, which is you ain't the thou. You are in relationship to the thou,
Yes.
to an other. And see, this is we don't want to. It's the individual ego enriched by relationships with unconscious material that is then the sort of steadying force.
But what about the line of all manner of suffering can lead your hair astray? That line.
Oh, that's absolutely true, and it's just basic postulate of Buddhism. But it's also true of everything psychoanalysis has discovered, that the kind of sufferings and unconscious sufferings you undergo as a child can really seriously distort your perceptions of reality.
Mhm.
Well, one of Freud's early followers, who then broke with him, Alfred Adler,
Yes.
usually knocked around quite a bit by both Freud and Jung, had the perception. It was Adler that developed the idea of the inferiority complex,
Exactly.
right? And so he differed from Freud. I mean, as Freud thought that sort of sexual instincts were the main motor of conflicts with world standards and so forth. Adler actually thought the main motor of neurosis was the feelings of inferiority when people get when their sort of nascent sense of self suffers a blow at an early age. And Adler really anticipated a lot of stuff that comes out of disability studies in noting that if someone, you don't have to have some obvious birth defect or problem or whatever we call it now. If you feel you are inferior, you develop this compensatory, almost reaction formation in the self. Like I was always a small kid, and that deeply affected me in terms of giving me suspicion and dislike of the overt, the Chads and all those powerful guys in the world. Like I wasn't one of them, right? And it's hard, so you get kind of stuck in points of resentment that then give your psyche this like an edge that is not exactly helpful, because you end up having to combat a lot of interior flack that's coming from you and making you overcompensate. So I just think
are you ready for some Gnosticism?
Sure. Yeah, let's go for the Gnosticism.
And then if we have time, to get where they get to, well, if they get to where they explain what arena is.
We got about 15 minutes.
I know. Let's go. Okay.
I too have been conducting investigations into the nature of Salmael's existence. What I have found suggests it is the materialization of an instinct which exists subconsciously in the human heart.
So, do you mean it's a sort of malevolent god, like Yaldabaoth?
That was the first god they thought.
Okay, so
Unlike the
2
god
points.
Yes.
Okay, anyone who uses the word subconscious instead
I know.
of
I get it. It's wrong.
just isn't reading, right? Read Freud, read Jung. They never talk about the subconscious. William James does, but he wasn't the one that developed psychoanalytic theory. So when people are talking about subconscious, they're not reading the sources. They're like absorbing stuff off of Wikipedia, or even worse, asking stuff of AI, which is for people who don't understand that you are smarter than AI. Smart does not mean able to dispose of a lot of information. Smart means having a mind, which is something that AI does not have. We worship that beast. The machine is the beast. I mean, this is another.
They actually there's some machine imagery that goes on with Samael. I don't think we're going to get to it, but
Yeah.
There's
So Samael is like God of the blind, and actually, the Gnostic text, he's basically identical with Yaldabaoth, the
yeah.
ultimate battle.
No, we fought the Demiurge 3 times. It's all right. We fought Yaldabaoth, we fought the Demiurge, and now we fought Samael. So they're all separate entities. Again, the Demiurge was, spoilers for Strikers, was freaking Siri becoming a god. So that was interesting, of course.
Well, see, my beef with games that retail the Gnostic vision that there's an evil creator
Yeah.
don't really think it through theologically
Yeah, I get it.
and understand why Jews, Christians, and Muslims reject such a schema. Because it's basically saying all your problems are caused by evil material existence and by a God that gave you a body from which emerged terrible passions. All your problems are due to your physical embodiment. If only your mind could be uploaded in a computer and live forever, then you'd be free. Right?
Again, the other, we literally
I know you get it.
we literally fought a thing that basically was the embodiment of uploading your mind to a computer. So it definitely rejects that. But yeah,
If there is a spoiler in the beautiful world, but the spoiler is us.
yes,
Yes, there's danger in the world. Yes, there are volcanoes. Yes, there's malaria. Yes, there's all sorts of microbes that do god-awful stuff to you. But we're the ones that inflict evils on each other.
yes,
It's only through, if like, just go with the hypothesis of the devil for what it's worth. Devil can't make you do anything. Devil persuades you to do stuff as if it's for your own good. And then the devil's laughing his ass off in hell because all he wants to do is spoil the good creation, which in the biblical myth, everything was created good. Nothing was created bad. There's no evil demiurge.
yeah,
Rather, they're evil forces that make you want to think that the fabric of the world is evil instead of dealing with the roots of evil in yourself. All right. Sermon over.
Well, I would like to get to this interesting, very fascinating idea again about the instinct.
Of control,
What it does
who
with
was
it.
born from a collective yearning for idleness. Salmael is, how should I put this? A universal instinct that's burdened man since the beginning of time. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to die. Man's innate desire of self-preservation is another way to put it.
Nix on that. We're going to suffer, we're going to hurt, we're going to die. But that doesn't mean that there can't be goodness in the space of suffering. See, they're making it out like, oh,
they're very much saying suffering is good. They're saying suffering is good, but they're saying suffering is good.
Well, I'm not saying suffering is good, but I'm saying it is the framework in which embodied existence happens.
Yes, that's what it's saying that it's saying that our desire for suffering, our desire for self-preservation is again our desire to not suffer, which is the point that's basically being made is our desire for self-preservation is actually in a way selfish, and that selfishness has stopped societal change.
Okay, but see, this is the problem. This is actually the notion that self-preservation is about individual self-preservation is a distortion of what modern evolutionary theory is.
I agree.
That's from your acquaintance with Jonathan Haidt's work.
Yeah.
The self-preservative instincts in human beings work through through group.
Yes.
Successful group strategies. And yes, there are dangers of those, hatred of people in the out group, but self-preservation is never about man alone on a fortress, defending against all comers. Self-preservation, for example, should lead all the citizens of the United States to realize that corporations are still polluting earth, air, and water in a way that damages us. And why are they doing it? Because of the money for the stockholders. So until we get more Bernie Sanders like people in there who are willing to restrict, the amount of bucks that are going to go upstairs to those stockholders, we're going to continue poisoning ourselves. So self-preservation says we need to start thinking about the good of the whole and start opposing this runaway capitalism that thinks like Elon Musk is just great and I want to be Elon Musk. No, I want to trim that dude. Time to shear the big sheep. This is my political motto. We don't want to kill the big sheep, just shear the motherfuckers. Right? We can use their wool, right? Shear the big sheep.
To purge your will by using the memories which lay dormant in your heart.
Well, I never would have guessed there was a war being waged inside my own mind.
That Jung in a whole, isn't that Jung in a nutshell?
Actually, it's very Freud. One of Freud's most famous quotes is he said, and Jung actually refers to this in one of the pieces he wrote about Freud, is that he says Freud came up with the totally important understanding that the ego is not the master in its own house.
Yes.
It doesn't mean we're run on a leash by the instincts, but that unless we are aware of their power and the power of archetypes, we are less of a so-called master in our own house than we might otherwise be.
Even so, your subconscious was putting up a fight against Salmael's invasion from the very beginning.
Okay, they said subconscious again. They use the word they've used the word collective unconscious many times. Like it's not like babbling on. I don't know why they're saying. I don't know why they're saying subconscious. I don't know why.
They're not readers. They've skimmed some shit and have packed it into a game. Basically, this is why there's just not a shortcut toward understanding difficult psychological theories. It's like I'm a total appreciator of the need for leisure and downtime, but you got to turn off the screens and hit the books if you want to start decoding the deep forces that give you less control over your own life and society. It's just like it can't be archetypes for fun and entertainment. It's got to be work. Like if you've ever been in psychotherapy, you'll know that the therapist will refer to it as work. Right? It's serious. When there's work to be done on yourself, you got to go in there. You got to go to therapy and face the work. There's no point in reading. I mean, this is the thing is I spent a lot of time in college reading Freud and Jung and all these guys thinking one day I'll go into therapy. One day I'll go into therapy. I'm okay now. You know what? I wasn't okay. I was struggling. I wasn't okay. I didn't go into therapy till I'd made an early and disastrous and because too rapid and poorly judged marriage. And then it took me about 1.5 years and a fuck of a lot of pain to get out of that. And then I was like, I am walking my ass over to the Jung Institute on the east side of New York and find myself an analyst and not do the self-destructive stuff again. So
just like Salmael,
unfortunately life is both serious and short.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about dreams and archetypes briefly?
Well, no, not really. I just the reason why I want to talk about dreams is that it's part of the therapeutic experience is understanding that, and this is, I think, what's somewhat misleading about these things is that you don't actually know the unconscious by thinking about it and guessing about it. I was there in college. I was reading all this stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I'm aware of the unconscious. I actually tried keeping a dream diary for a couple of months. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night whenever I dream and I'd write this stuff down. And I did that. I filled up a little booklet. And then I realized, like, what can I do with this material? I can free associate to it. But outside of a therapeutic context, when I had an experienced analyst there who could kind of help me work through some of the material, it wasn't all that useful. I mean, sometimes it is, okay, but you don't, it requires that other person out there to show you ways in which you're still living out unconsciously, even though you can be like highly conscious. And you can be highly conscious, highly intelligent, but still be deeply clueless about your shadow. Now, my father's a good case in point. Highly intelligent man, very sensitive, reader of literature, thinks he knows himself. And yet, like, his shadow's out there, as one Jungian teacher I had in grad school said, leaving a slimy trail.
Remember I sent you I sent you that screenshot from the Persona 3 remake, which we talked about Persona 3, and there's just that little line that says, the shadows, people are blissfully unaware of their shadows, which is what is ruining society. I mean, they don't say it that way, but they basically say that.
It's the Jungian analyst and professor Ann Ulanoff, who said this thing like, if in your life you're leaving a slimy trail that people are slipping on, that's your shadow doing that.
Yeah.
You're trying to be a good guy, but you're just not in control of the whole thing. So yes, as Freud said, dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, but it almost requires that one-on-one, that I and thou of the therapeutic situation, where in the relationship to the other person, right? This is what in psychoanalysis is called the transference. You yourself get to rework some of those neurotic conflicts that develop through your relationship to your neurotic parents, like all of our parents, right? So yeah. So big shout out for the word neurotic. It's not used anymore. People don't like to use it anymore. Right? When I was in college, we all admitted, oh yeah, we're all neurotic.
It's still one of the big 5 personality traits, neuroticism, isn't it? But I still don't
right,
know
but they've reduced
what it even means.
They've reduced it to a personality trait. Like, how can you use a word like neuroticism unless you'll acknowledge there's something called neurosis?
Exactly.
Right. So
why don't you use using the Myers-Briggs in general without acknowledging that Jung is behind it, who didn't even care much about it because he never followed up on it. This sort of people who are just obsessed with personality theory, and the guy that brought me to it was like, these people, I need to make my own system because these guys only care about personality theory.
Well, and that's the problem, is you can take the Myers-Briggs and it's like, say, I'm on the borderline between introvert and extrovert. Okay, fine. That's like it's kind of a parlor game. But it doesn't it doesn't really give you a handle on the unconscious conflicts that are creating some kind of havoc in your own life. Right? That's sort of the problem.
Was this at least better than the Chinese game I showed you then? Is this still at least better than that one?
Okay, so now, mind you, like on the level of entertainment, I'm as entertainable as the next person. Like, I love Game of Thrones. I think
that was the first thing I showed you, was Game of Thrones for a second. I'm saying regarding the actual academics for you, was this better on its academics?
Well, it's just Gnostic. It's very tough to take these Gnostic names like Samael or Yaldabaoth and then put them in a modern context and have them make sense. There are ways in which the study of ancient Gnosticism can cast some light on structures of the modern world.
Why do you think Jung was so obsessed with Gnosticism? Is it because people accused him of being a Gnostic? I think that isn't, for me, it's that the consciousness is the world that we think, and we need to go beyond that to get to the unconscious. But
So
that's
like that. And for the same reason that he liked the Chinese alchemical text, Secret of the Golden Flower.
Yeah, but that's very much more pro-body than Gnosticism.
Yeah. See, his argument was that the tradition of ancient philosophy in Greece, by and large, is all about the elaboration of the conscious mind.
Yes.
And Freud's and his critique of Western man, to put it that way, is that we're all about the conscious mind, and we think our rationality has conquered the unconscious, blah blah, and conquered instinct and all that. But we haven't. And so when he found something like Gnosticism, where it's clearly like fantasy material that is being produced by these sort of cosmological myths that the Gnostics have, he thinks that fantasy material is representing the projections of ancient people. of the unconscious.
Mm.
So basically, he's just really excited to be on the track of some clues to say that just as we can read dreams of modern people as revealing unconscious material, so too we can look at the cosmological fantasies of the ancients in showing that unconscious factors are working, and a kind of a counterpoint to the supposed Greek rationality that you see in the philosophers, but indeed there's deeply, irrational aspects of Greek thought. Recommend another book, The Greeks and the Irrational, a derivation of the whole idea of soul from the shamanic experience, from the person whose soul can emerge out of the self, commune with the gods, and come back down to the tribe, to bring some kind of remedy for whatever the problem is. So I think Jung's excitement is trying to say it's not just us as moderns that are making up an unknown, irrational realm that we have to come to terms with. Mm-hmm. And that's why you also pointed to the fact that dream interpretation was big in the ancient world. There were also sort of trance phenomenon, and then the kind of fantasies you see in Gnosticism. It's just his way of saying this is a structural aspect of human being, and we need to dip into it. And that's the same reason he started talking about UFOs. He doesn't think they're real UFOs out there. He thinks that when people are talking about UFOs, they're basically involved in projecting aspects of the unconscious that in an older worldview would have been called angels or devils. Mm-hmm. So it's when we track human fantasy life, we see this sort of engagement between the conscious and the unconscious material. And I think a fair amount of that, insofar as people's fantasy life goes into the making up of games, mm-hmm. like these video games, we're also seeing that dynamic, but it's not a pure fantasy life. It's rather like a layering of fantasy life and then these concepts that have been taken from different psychodynamic traditions and sort of layered on the material. Mm-hmm. But I would say the main thing is that it's really important to distinguish entertainment from education, and also important to distinguish both fantasy and education from self-work that can helpfully be done by a number of disciplines, including things like yoga, where you learn to regulate your breathing, to let thought go, right? This same kind of techniques are useful in certain forms of therapy, cognitive behavioral, where we learn to keep your mind in the breath, let the thoughts go. So again, it's just really important to distinguish these realms of life. And if you're interested in the self-improvement things, you kind of got to treat that seriously, along with your entertainment life and your education life. There's also that work, with the therapist that's very important to do.
Oh, I still got.
Okay, I don't know whether I'm raining on the fun parade of the video games, but representing Jungian thought, you got to frame it as a psychotherapy, as a theory that was developed in relationship to the goals of psychotherapy, right? Jung's got a paper by that name in Spiritual Problem of Modern Man, The Goals of Psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Right? The goals of psychotherapy is what produce these forms of theory, which then lead back into the therapy. So
yes. I will say, though,
this has been fun.
This was fun, and I still got to say, I mean, not this game, but obviously the original Persona 5, I mean, inspired me to go down this track, and I guess at least for some people like me, to actually look into what Jung actually said. And I thank you. Obviously, I keep on thanking you for inspiring me to look into this and to make this a big part of my academic mindset. So.
No, and that's the great part, is that these products of the imagination that are fun to read or to play a game then stimulate you to move into other spaces of life that involve either the hard work of intellectually mastering material or the hard work of being in psychotherapy and having to pop up the thoughts you don't tell anybody else to that therapist. Let's grant it's a scary process, but if there are people out there who are listening to this, they can always talk to you, and I know you've been through the, therapeutic process, as I have, and it's a way, to get a better grip in yourself and get a better grip in the world, and have more freedom to develop a fabulous life in accordance with both our instincts, which we want to have operating, as well as the sort of loftier aspects of the human mind that allow us to filter those instincts a little bit, shall we say.
All of this, I mean, this all started with when I asked, do I have a persona? And then you told me to read Jung's Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and then I watched the Persona 5 anime, and it all went down from there.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, you know what? I'll come back sometime.
Yes.
I got to hop on to other aspects of my life at this moment, but it's really fun
As
talking
I do too, but this was fun talking.
Yeah.
All right. This was
All right.
a better, more firm conclusion than the Genshin one. So,
All right.
David, it's Video Game Philosophy. Peace.
Okay. Peace, David. Take care.